Good afternoon, all of you. This session is by Professor Alok Dhawan. Professor Dhawan is the director of CSIR, Indian Institute of Toxicology Research, that is IITR in Lucknow. He is a founder director of Ahmedabad University. He holds honorary DSc degree from University of Bradford in the US. He had earlier served as Kieri DST Standard Research Award. He received that award on cellular fate of novel nanomaterials for therapeutics and consumer products in collaboration with Professor Diana Anderson. He is a member of National Academy of Medical Sciences since 2005, served as chairman of CSIR Task Force on Integrated Next-Gen Approaches in Health, Disease, and Environmental Toxicity, that is in-depth in 2015. He holds PhD in biochemistry from University of Lucknow, and he is the first person to start the nanomaterial toxicology in India. And he is the founder of Indian Nanotechnology Nanoscience Society. That is 2007. He founded that society, a very prestigious society for nanoscience. The people working on the nanoscience area. I mean, his CV is really profile. I really don't have any time, and I'm also not qualified to introduce him. But as a person, he's also really into the science leadership. So he's proving himself to be a great science leader at IITR. So this session is also co-moderated by my friend, Dr. Niti Kumar, and she is now working as a scientist at CDRI Lucknow. And recently she got the National Science Day in the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Big achievement, friends. And she is, of course, a young science leader by herself. And she holds a PhD from IGIB in New Delhi and holds postdoc from Max Planck Institute in Germany. I welcome you both. Over to you, ma'am, Dr. Niti. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Felix. And I welcome Professor Dhawan to this science leadership workshop. Besides his academic and administrative contribution, I would like to mention that he's a great sports person. His positive attitude and sportsman spirit is reflected in conversations with him, and it's really a pleasure to interact and learn a lot of things from him. And he was our officiating director for a few months, and I got a chance to work with him and personally get some positive attitude from him. So with these few words, I would like to request Professor Dhawan to share his journey from a student to a scientist to an administrator. Over to you, Professor Dhawan.
Thank you so much, Niti, and thank you, Felix. I think it's a wonderful occasion for me. नमस्कार आप सबको, और हम सबसे पहले तो फिलिक्स और इनियास को धन्यवाद देते हैं कि उन्होंने एक ऐसा माध्यम बनाया, एक ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म बनाया जहां पर इन्वर्टेड कॉमर्स में जिनको ये लीडर्स बोलते हैं वो आके अपनी बात रख सकते हैं. एटलीस्ट पीपल हु हैव within again inverted commas achieve something in life in this country can come and present to the budding scientists, to budding leaders of science, and of course share some of their experiences as to how they reached where they reached in life. And I think I was very happy to listen to the initial talks of Dr. Ashutosh Sharma and Dr. Renu Sarup, and this morning by my friend Shashi. I think they all alluded to similar things. The only difference between their talks and mine would be that I'll have a PowerPoint presentation. I thought it'll become very boring after a while, just looking at me and seeing me talk. I think when you talk of leadership, it's a very different ball game. I think in my lifetime, like Niti mentioned, I had a very enriching life. In few senses, one, that I came out of an academic family altogether, and so I was given the freedom to speak what I wanted to. I could sort of discuss what I wanted to. I could practice what I wanted to. And from that standpoint, I think it was very enriching for me to meet the top scientists of this country at that point in time. And so therefore, I think it was very enriching for me. And then as I moved on, I kept taking risk one after the other. I was there part of my life in Assam University, Silchar, trying to establish the biotechnology department there, and then went on to Ahmedabad University for about 3.5 years, establishing the Institute of Life Sciences, where again, I had the privilege of meeting or working with almost 5 directors of different IIM in the country, 4 or 5 CEOs, and you know, the science leaders of this country. So I think it all depends on how you are groomed in life, and I think I was privileged to be groomed in the fashion that I was. People, I think, spoke about leadership being inborn. I would say, well, that is one of the things, that you are born with a leadership gene, if I may say so. But at the same time, you need to be born with a learner gene. I mean, the more you learn with the experiences of others, the more you become better in life, the more you can perhaps lead better in life. And apart from that, I think you need to also have an ecosystem where you can perform. So I think that's the other bit, that whenever a person becomes a leader, needs to ensure that you sort of have that ecosystem where a person can perform in life. And for me, life has been a quest for knowledge, and it's been a lifelong learning experience for me. And one of my mentors, I would say, used to say that I was dumb yesterday, right? So that means that every new day that comes, you learn something new. So I think that's the bottom line. As a leader, you always need to learn from others, absorb what others are saying, and try to see how you can improve yourself. The other things I would say that a leader should do, of course, is to ensure that whatever is there in that organization is simplified to the extent that people can understand. Once people start understanding, they can then perhaps see their own path. They can perhaps see a road through which they can go and create a niche for themselves. I think that creation of that ecosystem is what the leader should be doing. I'll share some of my thoughts as I move towards my presentation. So I'll just share my screen. Give me a second. Yeah. So there you go. So what I'll be talking to you today is about supporting risk in science for an Atmanirbhar Bharat. As you're aware, that our Honorable Prime Minister has given us a clarion call that we need to become self-sufficient, self-reliant. And so therefore we need, at the same time, science leaders like you who are participating in this, but also science leaders who are in various institutions to come up, take the risk, take a leap of faith, and sort of go forward and just do it, right? So I think it is very important for us to understand why we need sustainability, why we need sort of self-sustaining systems in this country. And no better a person in this country that can emulate this is, of course, our own Dr. Abdul Kalam. And I think he epitomized what self-sustenance means, and how one can become self-reliant and not get bogged down by the systems and still perform at the pinnacle, and ultimately become the president. So I was very fortunate to actually have a couple of meetings with him and try to understand the person behind that fantastic scientist and an individual and a great human being. While going through this leadership program, I was just trying to capture my thoughts as to how I should introduce this to you. And you would have noticed that I sort of started by speaking in Hindi, and it shows how we can also become leaders if we understand what we are saying, if we understand what we are working with, we understand the language in which we are communicating. And I think Shashi also alluded to in this morning in his lecture as to how one can communicate, either through just talking to each other, or through your body language, or whichever way you wish. But if you look at just just type leadership on Google and look at the dictionary, it gives you these many meanings in English. But if you go to Hindi, it just gives you 2 words, and that's netritva and agwai. So I think this brings me to my point that a leader needs to simplify things, and a leader can be made once he or she understands the domain in which he or she is working. It is very, very important for us as a country to ensure that everybody, right from the grassroots, is included in this race, or in this sort of Atmanirbharta of this country. And Atmanirbharta will only come when we become sort of strong from inside, and we have this Atmavishwas that we can actually do it. So I think it's very important in whichever language you can communicate, it doesn't matter, but as long as you can sort of communicate properly as to what you think, I think that is very important. The other way to sort of break it down, as I mentioned again, is if you just look at the leadership and you break it down in the middle, you'll have a leader and a ship. So the ship that leads the way for the others, sort of taking away the clutter, taking away the hindrances and allowing the others to perform. I think that is what leadership or a leader needs to do. I think that's very important to put things in context as to what leadership means. Doesn't only mean that you become a head of an institution, only then you are a leader. I think there are science leaders. There'll be innumerable Nobel laureates who never ever took the headship of an institution, but they were always science leaders. So I think let's not mix up head of institutions as leaders versus science leadership. I think leadership comes right from your childhood, depends on how you handle it, and you're groomed by your mentors and your teachers, and that's how you evolve. The other thing which is very interesting, I was just trying to make a difference between a leader and a CEO. I mean, this is something again which is confused very often, especially in the young brigade. They think CEO is a leader, but essentially a CEO is executing everything what is important for that company, right? And but at the same time, I would say if you're a CEO, then you also have to be the chief empathetic officer, which means that you should have empathy when you're working with people in your company, ensuring that the decisions that you take don't harm people, and if at all they are harming them, take them on board and then move forward. So I think it's very important for a leader to take people on board, ensure that everybody is part of the decision-making process. Even if they are not part of the decision-making process, at least you make them understand what the decision means. Brings me to my next point, which is very interesting. I think a person should be the chief meaning officer. And I was quite intrigued listening to a small piece by Jack Welch, who's the former CEO of GE. And he said a leader should be able to tell as a chief meaning officer. A leader is one who's the chief meaning officer, and he should be able to tell where you're going, why you're going there, and most importantly, what is in it for them. So the first two, I think the leaders are able to tell very efficiently and eloquently that, why we are going there. We need change, and we need change because, we have to keep abreast with what is happening in the world. And so therefore, that's easy to communicate. And why we are going there, that's also easy to communicate. But what is in it for each and every person working with you in your group, in your institution, in the country, in the state, I think it's very, very important to communicate. The people who have been able to communicate this meaning to the masses or to their group or to the institution, I think have become really good leaders. So I think it's very important at each step to communicate with your stakeholders, with your colleagues, with your friends, with your family, and try to tell them if you're going to do something, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for them? How it's going to evolve in the long run, at least what you think, how it's going to evolve in the long run. So I think it's very important that we keep on communicating with each other. That's I think, the sum and substance of how we begin. Since I belong to CSIR, I thought I'll just spend a few minutes on how CSIR provided leadership to science in this country. So as you're aware, it's called the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. And as I always say, the leader also needs to think a bit differently. So I thought of it over the period of time, and I thought, why not call it the Citadel of Scientists for Innovative Research? And that is what precisely it has been. And over the period of time, as you will see, in CSIR, we always say collaborate, cooperate, and co-create. I think that's the mantra. We have several institutions that collaborate with each other, and we also collaborate out of our CSIR system. The other thing I always say, especially for the young and budding scientist, it's always said, sky is the limit, right? For me, if I say anything that I can see in science, then I don't think that should be a limit. Because in Hindi, it is very well said, pratyaksham kim pramanam. Whatever you can see, you don't need evidence for. So I think I just did a point mutation here. Instead of Y, I bring I, and it becomes science, knowledge, and innovation. And that should be your limit. So I think that's how CSR looks at it. Sky is the limit for us. We just innovate, and that's how CSIR has grown over these years. And of course, R is for risk taking. So until you support risk, until you take risks, it's both ways. So I think for a leader, he or she has to support the risk. I think it's a no-brainer for a leader to support risk, I would say. So if you are supporting risk, you're supporting a person who's ready to take a leap of faith. If he or she is willing to take the leap of faith, I think you're winning both ways. If they succeed, you have won as a leader because there's a new thing that has evolved. If they don't succeed, again, you are the winner because you at least motivated that person to take the risk. So you're changing the character of the institution, you're changing the character of the individual, you're allowing them to take the risk. I think that itself is another property or another attribute that a leader should have. So as I mentioned, CSIR started even before our independence, provided the leadership in science. And as you will see, and under no circumstances I'm going to undermine the other institutions of science and technology that came forward. And the last one in the series was Department of Biotechnology in 1986. And so therefore, that's how the entire scientific ecosystem developed in this country around these various sort of institutions that came around. CSIR is also the only society in this country, it's a registered society, which is headed by the Honorable Prime Minister as the president of the society, and the Honorable Minister of Science Technology as the vice president of the society. And then we have our DG, who's the secretary of the society, and then we have other members. And as you see on this map, we are almost everywhere in this country. And we have about 38 laboratories working in different areas of science and technology. And I think it's been a very fruitful journey for me, as Neeti mentioned. As a student, I joined this institute, which was then the Industrial Toxicology Research Center, as a PhD student. And a few years here and there, but I sort of came back as a scientist in the institute, and now rose to the position of the leadership, which is the director of the institute. So it's a very fulfilling journey that I've had, and I owe it to my mentors and my sort of teachers who sort of gave me that freedom to perform or take the risk that I wish to take. And I'll share one of the stories with you. This was a very interesting sort of workshop that I had an opportunity to attend. And again, this is an example which I'd like to share, an anecdote which I'd like to share. Professor Baldev Raj, who was the director of National Institute of Advanced Studies in Bangalore, called me one day and he said, "Alok, we are having a workshop or a roundtable, and I'd like you to come and give us a talk on leadership." I said, "Fine, sir, I'll come." And later on, as the time progressed, I asked him for the program. And when the program came to me, it turned out, and this was in 2016 or 2017 somewhere, it turned out that most of the people who were talking were either CEOs or secretaries of government of India or Niti Aayog members and so on and so forth. And the people who were attending that workshop were actually directors of the institution. So that kind of challenge was thrown at me, and I immediately called him back. I said, "Sir, I think this is very embarrassing, and would you give me a frame of reference?" So he said, "Well, Alok, I think we want to hear the sort of thought process of each individual, and that's why I've called you, and you're perhaps the youngest who is going to speak in the audience. So we'd just like to listen to you, and the protocol will be that you'll speak for about 8 minutes and we'll have questions for about 20 minutes. So you can understand what I would have been going through at that point in time. I kept on talking to him about a frame of reference, which he didn't give me at all. And ultimately he said, "I can only share 2 things with you. In those 8 minutes, don't talk about yourself and don't talk about the institute. Talk about leadership. And at the end, if you wish, you can put in 1 slide for your institution." So it was really very difficult for me to sort of conceptualize this lecture to begin with. But if you don't take these risks in life, if you don't take these challenges in life, I think it'll be very difficult for you to move on. So ultimately, I took the risk, I took the challenge, because my own DG was in the audience at that point in time. So I thought, okay, let's see how to go about it. And this was the title of the sort of workshop or the roundtable that was happening, Sustaining Excellence with Relevance in an Organization. So I'll just share those 8 to 10 slides that I sort of shared with them, because it'll give you an idea as to what should be there in your mind when you're thinking of an organization, thinking of a leadership, thinking of a person who is trying to build an organization, thinking of a person who's trying to see how the organization can be in consonance and resonance with the global scenario. So I'll just share some of these thoughts with you now. Yeah. So the first thing I was sort of tempted to do was to make a triangle where we put in excellence and sustainability and relevance, and then see how you can build with all these three a vibrant organization, which I called at that point in time servo. When you look at servo in terms of engineering terms, then it means a system that takes feedback from the outside and changes accordingly. So I thought this is a fantastic idea. If you want to have a sustainable, excellent, relevant, vibrant organization, you need to take feedback from the outside and you need to change accordingly, right? So I put that if you are a servo organization, you keep taking feedback, you will survive. If you don't take feedback, you can be revived. If you still don't understand, you perhaps, for a better word, I would say voluntary retirement. I mean, basically the system will collapse. So I thought this was a fantastic thing, that as long as you have a feedback mechanism, you can survive. But if you don't have a feedback mechanism, which means that you're not changing, and the change will come through the leader as well as the organizational structure or the people who are in the organization. It's both ways. If the leader doesn't understand that it needs to change, or the people who are telling him to change, but he's not willing to change, I think the organization is going to collapse, and vice versa. If the leader is unable to communicate to the people how this change will impact their lives and how it's going to be better for them, I think again the organization will collapse. So I think it's a very appropriate thing that the organization and the leader should take feedback from the peer group, from people whom they are interacting on a daily basis, from organizations, and try to see how they can build a better work environment, build a better ecosystem for people to work. And so therefore, I thought I should give an A to Z of a servo organization, which essentially is to tell you what a leader should be doing when he or she has to ensure that the organization is a vibrant organization. So the first thing, of course, is the attitude of the individual. So as an individual, you need to be open, you need to be accessible to people. You cannot just close your door and sit inside and say, you know, whatever I'm saying is the final word. You need to talk to all walks of life, people from all walks of life, people from outside of the institute, people who are in the public. You need to understand the pulse, need to change accordingly. You should have the aptitude for it. The agility, of course, is very important, because as you move forward, you'll understand that if you don't change in time, perhaps you have lost it and somebody else will move on. Again, it is synonymous. You need to be agile and you need to be adaptable. You need to align both as an individual as well as an institution to the outside world, to the demands of the organization, to the demands of the country. So for example, now we are facing really hard times of COVID, and that's why we are talking on a platform, which is digital platform, and we need to align. If we don't align, we'll again get left out, and the knowledge that we have acquired over these period will all get lost. So I think it's very important. As a leader, one should promote autonomy, but with accountability. I think you need to let people do what they want to do, as long as they are aligned to the organizational structure, as long as they are aligned with the mandate of the country or the organization in which they work. But then just leave them. Don't try to micromanage everything in the system, otherwise it'll just collapse. The other thing I keep saying, the leader should not only benchmark the organization, but try to benchmark each and every individual, because that's how the excellence grows. You might have excellent people, but the sort of organization as a whole may not be excellent. Why? Because we are not benchmarking people. The other thing the leader should do is to cut off bureaucracy. I think it's very, 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 very important that the people do not face the heat of the bureaucracy. So the other thing that Jack Welch said, you should be a chief groomer, just clear the way for the others to work. so that they can work without fear, without any hassles or hurdles. I think that's phenomenal. That's what a leader should be doing. As I mentioned earlier, it's very important for the leader to ensure cooperation, collaboration, and competition. Competition not only within the institute, but also with other institutions. It's very important. So competition keeps you on your toes and keeps you working hard, keeps you thinking. So I think very important again. And as it's very well said, the only constant is change. So I think we need to accept change as it comes. And when you think that the change is a challenge, I think accept it with open arms and try to see how you can convert that challenge into opportunity, like what we are doing today. And I must compliment Inyas once again for getting people on board during these lockdowns and ensuring that people from all over the country can actually listen to them. Going to the other things, I mean, like, of course, you should have an eye for detail. There should be diversity in the system. They should encourage diversity. The system should be democratic, which means that the leader should ensure that the people around him are listened to. They are given due credit for what they are doing. There should be a drive in the system. That's the job of the leader, to drive the system, to ensure that everybody is energized, if I may use that word. But at the same time should ensure that there is delivery. So you can't have a leader doing everything, but there's no delivery. I think that's equally important. Then if you go to other areas, it's quite similar, that you be democratic. That means you have to engage with people. You have to empower people to the hilt. I think the more you can empower, the better it is for you. Then you can sort of be assured that the results are going to be there. Empathy is another quality or trait of a leader that should be there, but that should be ingrained in the entire institution. I think when I'm saying the leader, at the same time, I'm also talking about a vibrant organization. These are also attributes that the organization as a whole should have. The entire ecosystem should be enabling. At the same time, you should be ensuring that the people are exposed to different cultures. They understand what it means to be working in the culture that they're working and how they can further improve the sort of quality of the work ecosystem that we have. Equality, again, is very, very important. And that equality is not only gender equality, but all kinds of equality, including the fact that if a person cannot speak the English language as perfectly as you can, perhaps, but he or she can speak or communicate in another language, I think that's fine too. So therefore, there is no way that we should have any sort of friction in the organization in terms of equality. Ethics, of course, paramount. As I mentioned, a leader or an organization should always ensure that the energy levels are very high. And the enterprising concept, I always believe that if you're not able to sort of ingrain entrepreneurship in your colleagues, I think that, again, a person is missing on the leadership. At the same time, we need to be focused. As I mentioned, we need to have feedback. And a very important part of an organization or a leader is to be able to forecast or see the future. And as you're all aware that in these COVID times, we are all sort of taken unawares, but at the same time, we stood to the occasion, and we have now been able to get a hold of it. At least we are trying our best to ensure that whatever science or innovation or technology that this country requires is being able to be given by the organizations such as CSIR. Hierarchy is something I totally sort of disagree with in an organization. I think it should not exist. It should be a flat organization. The more flat an organization is, the better it is for an organization. Better it is for the productivity. I think it's the same is true for leadership. I think if you take people along, those are the people who will be remembered forever, not the people who are dictatorial in nature. Integrity is, of course, paramount. You need to inspire people around you. You should be inclusive, as I mentioned to you all the time, that you should be inclusive. And when you talk of inclusivity, every single individual matters. Interdisciplinary approach is very important. Innovation is important, and we should try to institutionalize excellence. For an organization, leadership is important, but for a leader, I think the fact that he should be or she should be a learner is very important. Need to motivate and nurture excellence all along in the institute. the people around the leader and the leader should be very passionate. The organization per se should be policy and process driven and not personality driven. And I mentioned this PPE today. I thought it's very relevant in these times. And I meant here that what you practice is what you preach, PP, and you enable. So I think what you practice, what you preach, and then if you enable or empower, I think that's how the leader should be working. We should look at the quantity, but with quality. Risk and reward should be simultaneous. I think if you're allowing people to take risks, you should also allow them to have the rewards for that risk. The more you make the place enjoyable, the better it is for the organization, better it is for people around you. Just find an excuse to get a cake or pastry in or a samosa into the organization, and people will really love it. Try to sort of, what should I say, the small successes should be enjoyed in the laboratory or in the organization, and that keeps the morale of the entire system up. We should always be in dialogue with the society and stakeholders, because they're the ones who keep us running. At the same time, I think the most paramount thing that a leader should do is to have trust, not only in himself, but also the people with whom he or she is working. Always as a team, you cannot have I. When you talk of a leader or a sort of an organization, things have to be time bound, and at the same time we need to transform. Leadership is good when they're able to transform the systems for betterment of the systems, to keep them abreast with the current scenarios. At the same time, should be 100% transparent. So the more people understand what you're doing, the more they are on board, I think the better will be the organization, better will be the productivity. And since we are all talking of the society at large, I think it's very important that when we look at utility of the organization, it should be looked upon as the social goods that the organization or that individual has been able to impart. Of course, you should have vibrancy and a strong vision for the organization as well as for the leader. There should be zero tolerance for nonsense, and that is what leads to zenith. I think what I will be, and this was the last that I gave them as a slide. Management is all about taking control, and leadership is all about giving control. I think this summarizes what leadership should be all about. It's not about how much power you wield. I think it's how much power or how much enabling systems you create and how much empowerment you create for your people around you. And I'll give you a small example from my life, and that really brought me where I am today. And I think then I'll close. This was a round table, and I think I must sort of thank Dr. Baldev Raj, who is right here, along with Professor V.K. Saraswat, and Dr. Giri Sani at that time, the DG CSIR, and all the directors from different institutions. He created this round table on sustaining excellence and relevance in an organization. So I think this is another level of leadership which allows the young people to come and share their points of view with the more experienced people. I would not necessarily say old, but the people who are much more experienced, and learn from their sort of experiences and bring them down to the institute where I was working. So I think that was a fantastic turning point for me as well. Now I'll share a small story with you. As a young scientist, way back in 2005, I was working at the Michigan State University with two professors there, Syed Hasham and Vladimir Taravara. And this was the day on which we had the meeting. It was absolutely chilly, and you can see the ice in front of the house. We had a meeting which was to discuss how these guys were at that time making nanoparticles, which are called fullerenes. And they wanted to see how we can do the toxicity of these particles in humans, and try to see whether they were safe or not. So I thought this was very exciting, but at the same time, since I was not, I'm sorry, just give me a second. Yeah, so I thought the first thing to do was to talk to them and see, what I'll be planning to do. So I just wrote a email, longish email, I would say, to the then director of our institute. He was joint charge from CDRI, Dr. C.M. Gupta, and I said to him that, well, this is where the world is going right now, and I'd like to start the nanomaterial toxicology in our institute on my return. And the very next day in the morning, I get an email back from him, "Dear Alok, please go ahead. Best wishes." So I think this is how a leader should be looking at when a person is willing to take the risk. And this is how I was supported in my time in 2005. Just to share with you that these nanoparticles are really small, which are 1 nanometer in diameter, for example, these carbon fullerenes, and the DNA is between 2 to 12 nanometers in diameter. So you can see how sort of difficult it is to understand what these are capable of doing in our body. So, but ultimately, when we came back, I was able to conduct these studies, and we had a publication. I would like you to sort of appreciate the timelines as well. I came back in about 2006 in February, and we were able to complete the work and publish in 2006 itself with this group. And I think for this group, this is the most cited publication so far that they have. Again, this was a risk that I took at that point in time in 2005, because there's nobody doing nanomaterial toxicology at that point in the country. Similarly, when we looked at the toxicity, we started to understand what are the principles behind it and how one would try to understand, simplify the field so that others could understand what I was doing. And this sort of went on for a while. We tried to understand each and every process that goes on in the safety of these nanomaterials. And it was extremely important for us to be able to sort of dissect out each and every issue that was pertaining to the nanomaterial toxicology. And as you see at the bottom, every single thing was documented. So each of these was published as a review. Those times were issues that were facing the entire globe. Scientists were sort of battling these issues on a daily basis for nanomaterial safety. So therefore, we looked at all the three issues, be it in vitro, in vivo, or in silico, looked at all the three approaches of addressing nanomaterial toxicology in the institution. At the same time, because these nanomaterials go into the environment, we also thought it would be prudent to look at the different, I'd say, animal systems or systems in the ecology, be it bacteria or paramecium, at different trophic levels to understand how these move. So these were very exciting times, I must say, when we started. At the same time, we were also looking at how to improvise and how to use newer techniques or develop new methods. And in this, we could find that, for example, we were earlier using transmission electron microscopy. But we thought, is it possible we can use flow cytometry instead of this? Because it not only requires a lot of time for TEM, but in flow cytometry, you can do many samples, and per sample, you get a very robust statistics. So we looked at the principles. So this, I would say, especially to youngsters, I think as long as you understand what you're doing in science, it is very important. The fundamental principles are important and you can build on them. So we understood the science behind flow cytometry and we tried to build over it. And immediately we found that what we were doing in electron microscopy could actually be replicated in flow cytometry. And we were able to show that these particles which were being seen inside the cell could actually be seen even through flow cytometry. So it became very simple and you could actually isolate these cells out. At the same time, we were looking at bacteria as one of the, as I mentioned, one of the organisms in which we wanted to study the nanoparticles. And here you'll see that as the bacteria were dividing, we still found nanoparticles inside. So again, it was very, very sort of exciting times for us. And then we looked at this for 3 generations. So first we looked at the internalization using flow cytometry, and then we re-inoculated and went for 3 generations, and we could still find nanoparticles inside. So it meant that almost 3 generations, when the E. coli was exposed to zinc oxide, we could still find nanoparticles inside the bacteria. And this third, I would say, was really fantastic. And these are all examples I'm giving because I was supported for the risk that I was doing, but then these were students who wanted to take the risk and I supported them. And this was a guy who had actually done his MSc in biotechnology, and he came and I said, I want to do molecular biology. At that time, we were trying to establish the in silico facility for nanomaterial toxicity. And I said, why don't you try this? It'll be really good for you. It's a new field that is upcoming. And so he tried it, and ultimately he sort of succeeded. And now currently he's doing his sort of postdoc abroad. But this was really interesting that we were able to look at the hydration in graphene oxide and how it was able to preserve the helical structure of the protein versus a graphene which was unhydrated. So essentially, this was a purely biological problem, a purely in silico solution, and published in a purely chemistry journal. So I think the more sort of out of the box you can think, the better it is for the field. And so therefore, over a period of time, we were able to build this entire engineered nanomaterial toxicology field in this institution, right from synthesis all the way up to in silico prediction. All these areas were developed in this institution, and that was very helpful for the country at that point in time. And currently, we have the nanomaterial toxicology, National Nanomaterial Toxicology Center funded by CSIR. So the examples that I'd like to share again, this was a publication we made in January of 2009. Some of you may not be able to see the date, but it's 16th of January 2009. And here in April 22nd, 2009, it appeared as a full page in the Science for Environment Policy of the European Commission. So again, I think India is very rich in its scientific pursuits. If you are able to do good quality science, there's no reason why we cannot be recognized all over the globe. So I think it's very important that we fix our eyes on problems that really require solutions, and just go and burn it. I think that's how it should be. And this was essentially they discussed on how this piece of work that we had done was very important in deciding whether or not the nanoparticles should be allowed at that point in time in cosmetics. Similarly, the work that I shared with you on flow cytometry appeared as a featured article. And this, again, this guy, a student of mine, was able to get a sort of new method in his name. So that method is now, will always be in the name of the student. So the student took the risk, he was supported, and now he has his own sort of method. And the third one was, of course, the in silico work that I shared with you. Again, this was a piece of really good work that the student was able to conduct. The publication of 2009 that I shared with you, the DST then went ahead and did an international comparative performance of India's research base, and in the areas of pharmacology, toxicology, and pharmaceutics. From 2009 to 2014, they came up with top 10 publications, one of which was in all these three fields was the work that we did with the DNA damaging potential of zinc oxide nanoparticles in human epidermal cells. So again, it goes to show that if you're able to think outside the box, you're able to, just focus on the problem at hand, you'll be able to carve a niche for yourself. So these were the kind of timelines that if you follow that, I sort of wrote to the director in 2005. We came back in February of 2006. In April, we were setting up facilities. In 2006 itself, we had submitted a proposal to DST for funding. We had formed the Indian Nanoscience Society in 2007. We'd done an international conference in 2008. We invited several countries to come to India. So either you go around and learn how things are going, or you invite the leaders in the field and try to learn from them. We did the latter. We invited the leaders from the field, and we started this system of learning. And then we went in and had several projects from European Union or from CSIR. And in 2011, we published the guidance document for safe use of nanomaterials. We had an advanced imaging facility later on. And in 2017, first time that we saw in May 2017, that CSIR was globally positioned among top 5 in nanomaterial toxicology. 2017, as Felix mentioned, I was given the DSc honorary causa for the work in nanomaterial toxicology by University of Bradford in the UK. And I was very fortunate that this was their golden jubilee year, and I was the first person to ever receive an honorary doctorate outside of UK from this university in their 50-year history. And in 2017, we published our first book on nanotoxicology, experimental and computational perspective in the issues of toxicology from the Royal Society of Chemistry. And later on, we had another couple of books in the next years in 2018 and 19. The guidelines that we actually published then formed the basis of the National Guidelines for Evaluation of Nanopharmaceuticals in the country, which was released by the Honorable Minister, Dr. Harshvardhan, last year. There's another guidelines that is coming for evaluation of nano-based agri-inputs and food products in India. That's again in the final stages and perhaps will be released soon. And all these guidelines, we have been participating in formulating these guidelines. The work that was done has now come up in the guidance of safety assessment of nanomaterials in cosmetics. This was in October 30th in 2019. The Scientific Committee on Consumer Safety in the European Commission. Another guidelines be DST on the safe use. Again, our guidelines has been mentioned in this as to how we should use the nanomaterials in our laboratories. And not only that, we were able to train 7 or 8 European countries in how to do nanomaterial toxicology, and they actually went back and established in their own countries. So it was very rewarding, I would say, this journey that started with just an email to the director and he allowing to do what a young scientist that time took the risk, and that was supported by this institution. And as I mentioned, CSIR currently stands in the top 5 in the 3 areas of toxicology: industrial toxicology, food, and nanomaterial toxicology. I think it's very important. This slide I always love to show because this was the next day after Christmas that I took the photograph in Michigan. It has got a lot of science in terms of the bird flight, but it has got a lot to do with leadership. The bird that is flying in the front, the other birds are following them, so they trust the leader. The leader actually clears the path for others to follow. And not only that, I think the bird also provides a lesser amount of force that the others have to put, because it creates a certain amount of vacuum so that the other birds that are flying can actually move forward. At the same time, the leader should understand after a while that when the leader is tired, they should step back, or they've done their job, they should step back and let the next bird take over, the next leader take over. So I think that's a continuous process of developing excellence. And I think what INEAS is doing is precisely the same thing. They're trying to develop science leaders or leaders for this country who will be not only taking the risk in science, but with their focused approach will create an Atmanirbhar Bharat, a Bharat which will have Atmavishwas and not be looking at always at the West for new ideas. I think this is another beautiful cartoon, which the first time I saw was in one of the alumni websites, but just goes to show that we started as an ape, we came to the Stone Age, then the Iron Age and the Modern Age, and we're almost the same gait as we were when we started. The only thing I would mention to the youngsters who are online, please ensure that you apply your mind and not get bogged down with what is there on Google. Somebody else has put it in Google for you. So I think apply your mind first. If you need, it should just be used as a tool. I think it's what you think you need to first hypothesize and try to see where it's going. And then if you need any help, you can take the help of others in this field. I think it's equally important that as a leader, but also as an investigator, you should have an eye for observation. The specimen or the slide or the object that you look at is the same, but it's how in depth you look will decide how good a leader you are. The organization is the same. You can either look at just the facade, or you can look in depth and see how the system is. So here you can look at the person who's actually clicked the photograph inside the eye of the individual that you just saw. or for that matter, here is an owl, and you can actually again see the individual that clicked the photo, but also the flash that has come out while clicking the photograph. And again, the more in-depth your observation is, the better it is for you. I think here we see two birds in the morning, but when you actually, I'm sorry about this, but actually when you go in depth, you'll see that this is actually a feather, which looks like actually a very weird bird. This is a feather, this is the ray of sunlight coming through, and this is the beak of the crow. So both are crows sitting in the morning and trying to groom themselves. I think it's very important for all of us to see things our way, but in a positive way, as Neeti mentioned in her opening remarks. Life has a lot to offer to us. It is on us how we take it and what we make out of our lives. It's very important as leaders, as young entrepreneurs, as young students who are wanting to become scientists. I think we are blessed that we are born as a human being, and we should make the most of it. I was blessed to be able to initiate or to inaugurate by my talk the TEDx Lucknow chapter a year and a half back, I think. And I feel very, very, very fortunate that I have been able to do what I was able to do, because I was always supported by people in the past, my eccentricities, if I may call them, the risk that I took in my life, but I think it has been very rewarding. So I think, as you will see, successive prime ministers have rewarded science or been able to acknowledge that science is what matters. So starting from Jai Jawan, although it's to do with the Jawan, but I think hidden behind that is a lot of science and technology that supports the Jawan at the border. Then you come to Kisan, the farmer. Then you come to Vigyan, which was given by the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Bajpayee. And then Jai Anusandhan was given by our own Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi ji. So I think at each point in time, the polity has understood the importance of science and the leadership of science that this country is providing to the world. So with this, I think I come to the end of my talk, and I'd like to thank INEAS profusely for giving me this opportunity. And not only that, I think I must thank Felix for his determination to ensure that people whom he invited sort of first agreed to him, and then he would sort of ensure that they are on time all the time without fail. So I think with these words, Felix, I'd like to thank you and Neeti for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with the young brigade who is out there in these difficult times of COVID. And I think I'm almost in time. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Dhawan. It's very insightful to listen to the different aspects of leadership, especially, you know, as you have rightly mentioned, effective leadership can happen at small levels also, wherein we try to recognize the strength and weaknesses and try to bring people from with different capabilities and different temperaments and build a team, work together and continuously evolve. So this is very important, I think, in our lives also, wherein we deal with people with different backgrounds and different capabilities. So with this, I would not take much time and go to the questions. So there is a question from one of the teachers, Namrata Ray. She is an assistant professor and she teaches undergraduate and postgraduate students. And she wants to know how she can inculcate leadership qualities in her students.
That's fantastic. I think, Namrata, the fact that you asked it itself shows that you have this quality of leadership in yourself first to begin with. The second, I would say, is encourage them to stand up and ask questions, not be afraid of you. As I mentioned in my talk, you should be able to listen to them. So if you create an environment where the student can actually stand up and express, I think that will be the first sign of leadership, that the person is able to stand up and express what he or she wants to say without any fear. Okay, that will create an environment and an ecosystem. Next will be to ensure that what he or she is saying. So I'll just give you an example, share an example so you'll understand what I'm saying. we ensure that in our institute, right from class 9 upwards, we get students to come and work with us in their summer vacations, not this year, but otherwise. So that is when we inculcate in them the fact that both of us are scientists, the student as well as us. So there's no hierarchy. So that then they get the freedom to speak. Then they get the freedom to think outside the box and try to practice what they're trying to sort of think. So I think as an undergrad, at the undergrad level, it's very important that we give them that freedom to think differently, to think outside the box, to at least whatever they've thought, at least try to practice it and see if they succeed or not. The one thing I must also share with you as a teacher, I think it's very important to inculcate in them or to ingrain in them that sort of failure is not an option. Failure should not be in their dictionary. It can be unsuccessful or successful attempts. I think failure is a taboo in our society as also globally. So I always say it's an unsuccessful attempt rather than it's a failure. So I think as long as we can, and each of us have a different capability of doing things. So I think the best example that was given for leadership and how you inculcate in that was that of two cricketers. I don't want to name them in this, but I think one was an exceptional individual, but the other was an exceptional leader because he was the best captain the country could have. So I think if we inculcate these sort of positive points in the students, that you are really worth, they may not be the best in this subject, but as long as they can think in the area that they want to excel in, or they're sort of go-getting people who can just go ahead and do things, the people who can take people along. So I think you need to identify these individuals, bring them to a small group, and then you can drive them and give them the opportunity to go and perform maybe in the society, maybe in their own backyard or whichever way you like. So I think it's a fantastic thing that you've actually thought of it. So I'm really happy that we still have teachers of that order in our community.
Yeah, excellent talk, Professor Dhawan. It is amazing. You actually spoke so many things, so including I really like the way you started your talk, especially about the head of institution is, and the leader is really different, and Nobel Prize winners also, many are leaders, though they are not really the head of the institute. You also said a lot about the feedback and the change. So exactly that is the core scientific methodology, and it's amazing. It's absolutely fabulous talk. You covered really interesting topics, really relevant to the workshop. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So without wasting much time, a lot of questions here. So I will just pick up one question here. Harita from Payyanur in Kerala is asking, Higvita is one of my favorite short story in Malayalam by the Malayalam author M.S. Madhavan, in which author compared the protagonist who saves a little girl from rape with Higvita, the Colombian goalkeeper in a football game who saves a goal. So similarly, sports and science could also serve as an excellent analogy. Teamwork is important for both sports and science. So as a sportsman, how will you relate the leader of a team sports like cricket captain with the science leader?
Yeah, perfect. I think let me put it this way. And Neeti introduced me saying that I'm a sports lover as well. And it so happened that I used to play a lot of sports in my institute as well, and ultimately ended up in heading the sports promotion board of the CSIR. I think I don't differentiate between the two. End of the day, sports is a fantastic science in its own right. So if you talk of science, I mean, sport is also a science. So if you look at from that prism, the leader of sport has to apply that much more science in the sport itself. The fact that you have to carry along the team with you means that you need to know the sort of strong points and the weaknesses of all the players in your team. They may have their own sort of behavioral problems or issues. They may have their own strengths and weaknesses. For example, she said cricket. A person could be fantastic in batting. The other one could be fantastic in bowling. The third would be a fantastic all-rounder, right? As long as you can identify as a leader, that means the captain can identify the sort of strengths of each of these individuals, and then be able to see at which point which sort of armament has to be used, or which kind of person has to be deployed. I think he or she would become the best leader in a cricket match. So I see an absolute synergy in, and I don't see any divergence when you talk of a cricket team, or you talk of a science leader, or you talk of a leader of an institution. I think both are equally good in terms of science. Both have to understand the team. Both have to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the team. Both have to understand at an individual level in the team how that individual is going to perform. Only then the entire team will be able to win. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah, so I'll pitch in. So there's a question by Rekha Lokanti. She has asked the question that a lot of nano-coated micronutrient fertilizers are under trials. So what could be the negative or the environmental issues associated with it? Can you please comment on that?
I can comment, but I think it's a very tricky issue, to be honest, because I mean, a lot of people are already up in arms that we should not use nano-coated particles in the environment. And that is precisely why the government decided to come up with a policy, which is still under review. It's on the DBT website. I would encourage the lady who asked the question to actually read it. But the major issue that I can share with you as a scientist is the fact that people are apprehensive. I wouldn't say, it's just apprehension because you don't have data enough. That if we leave these coated particles inside the soil, how they would impact the resident microflora that is there, or the bacteria that are there in the soil, how they will impact the next crop, for example. And the fact that recently we had this issue of microplastics coming into water and so forth. So I think that has increased the apprehension or the fear of people. But still, I think as we progress with technology, we'll try to understand the science in that technology. We'll try to understand how the different trophic levels are impacted. So now at least we understand, for example, that the pesticides that are used elsewhere in the world ended up in Arctic ice. They were never used there at all. So I think now people, as we get a better understanding of the field of environment and how these nano-encapsulated pesticides or other maybe fertilizers are utilized in the field, how they will behave. Let's say in summers in Rajasthan or summers in Uttar Pradesh versus summers in Chennai, which are very hot and humid. So I think it'll be good to understand, and that is where I think these guidelines are very enabling, and we're trying to see how we can enable these to move forward.
Okay, so I will just pick one digress. It is basically not a relevant question, but still just for a sake, just spare 30
Felix,
seconds for me.
I'll just interject here. I think questions are always relevant. The answer may be right or wrong, right? So,
yeah,
as a question
this,
that has to
exactly
be brought forward.
Absolutely. So this question is by Keshav Goyal. He's asking, Dr. Vandana Vinayak talked about Sir Alok Dhawan as her mentor. Please share your experience. So here, that is why this one is actually not relevant here, because first of all, I congratulate Keshav Goyal because you have photogenic memory. You pay a lot of attention on these talks. I'm really happy to know that. And now the problem here is that it is not Alok Dhawan. His name was Ashok Dhawan. Just got confused, but congratulations. You have your memory power is amazing. Okay. It is Ashok Dhawan. It is not relevant here though. Now I'll pick up another question here. Ankita Rajput from Agartala is asking, Tripura. Congratulations, sir, on your great and timely achievement for inventing a novel machine to disinfect N95 mask to fight the COVID-19. So can you share the story behind it?
Yeah, sure. I think that again is out of our curiosity and out of the risk that we always take. So this was a startup in Lucknow, and they had a technology already existing, which was a microwave-based disinfection system for biomedical waste. So we had bought a machine to disinfect the waste coming out of the animal house, and that's how we started. And ultimately we said, well, this is a fantastic machine, but only doing one job, that is disinfecting the biomedical waste. And so we discussed with this startup, and they said, we'll be happy to incubate with IITR and see how we can further evolve this machine. And so then we sort of developed applications on that machine that could disinfect linen, fibers, cloth, blood bags, etc. So that sort of cycles of microwave we were able to develop with them or co-develop with them. And that is when, so when COVID came in, so they again came back to us and said, well, since we already have a cycle for linen, can we tweak that and see if it will be good for PPEs and for N95? I think that's how we got into it. And again, I'll keep repeating myself so that it gets etched into the memory of the youngsters. Please do take risk in life. It's worth taking all the time. So as a leader, I took a risk. As a young sort of scientist, I took a risk. Unless you take risk, you would not get rewards. And that was the reward that we got. I mean, even Honorable Prime Minister's Man Ki Baat updates, it was tweeted through that handle that this machine has come up. So I think we're very glad. We're still waiting. Of course, there'll be a policy decision whether or not to sort of come up with these machines to reuse the PPE kits, but at least we now have the technology, and that is what Atmanirbharta and Atmavishwas is all about in this country.
So on similar lines of taking risk, there's a question by Shri Kriti, and she's saying that being a good mentor or a good leader is a baggage. It's a baggage of laurels and criticism by your own team. So how do leaders manage the criticism? Is her question.
Oh, well, I think if you ask me honestly, criticism is something that I learn a lot from. So I don't think it's a baggage at all. It's how people other than yourself look at you and what they think of you. So don't let criticism take over you. Learn from criticism always without fail. That is one. Secondly, I think again it is English language, but I think I should mention it here. Mentor is fine, but if you look at PhD guides and PhD supervisors, the students, what they don't understand, they're actually supervisor or guide, and that's it. So students should actually be able to have that freedom to plan their experiments and run their experiments, and the guide should only facilitate. I think as long as they understand, and the simplest example that I give is if you open a PowerPoint slide, you do the right button click and it shows you guides and grids. It doesn't tell you what to do. It just shows you guides and grids. So guide is just to guide you, and that's it. Ideally, the ecosystem should be created by the leader or the guide or the supervisor, and the people inside that ecosystem should be empowered enough to sort of perform and test out their hypothesis. I think that's how it should be. And criticism, I don't think should bog you down at all. There's a lot of positive criticism, I would say this way. And even if it's a negative criticism, if you can see through it and see the point of view of the other person, by all means, you should look at it and see what you can learn and how you can include those people as well in your decision making as and when it comes finally.
All right. So here is a question from Sayali Sangole from Mumbai. Excellent talk, sir. You talked about importance of feedbacks. In our university, we have feedbacks too, both for teachers and students. Issue is that no one bothers to read the feedback and change the policy accordingly, making the entire exercise futile. So how to make lawmakers pay more heed to the feedbacks?
So I think the fact that you mentioned it shows that at least the first step has been taken in your university, that people are taking feedbacks. I think from feedback to policy is a very, very long journey. Because the policy is not for your university, it will be pan-India for all universities by MHRD. The feedback is to ensure that at every point we get inputs either from students or from teachers, vice versa, both ways it is true. Teachers tend to improve their pedagogy, they tend to improve the way they impart education through those feedbacks, but at the same time, these feedbacks actually get collected. They are shared when the NAC accreditation comes. They are able to look at those feedbacks. They can take those feedbacks, and they are then captured at a central level to see how they improve policy. So it does take time. And so therefore, I mentioned, for example, when Neeti asked me about this nano encapsulated fertilizers or pesticides, already a policy is online, right? Waiting for feedback. So all people who want to give their feedbacks can give the feedback. Even before the policy started, there were a lot of feedbacks. So now they've been framed, policy have been framed, put up again on website. Everybody can give the feedback, and those feedbacks again will be incorporated. So it's a dynamic system. Education is a dynamic system. For example, this I would have never thought in my life giving a talk from my office, pan-India, and people are listening to me, although I can't see them, right? But so this is a paradigm shift. It is feedback that you took, that Inyas took, that these are times where people are sitting home. We need to reach out to them. This was the feedback. What you did was this entire workshop for 5 days, right? So I think it takes time, but I think I congratulate the girl who said that her university is at least taking the feedback. I assure her that these are getting collected somewhere. It takes time for those feedbacks to get converted into actionable points. But I think that's how the system works. We are a big country, and it takes time to sort of bring it to the fore.
Yeah, you've also rightly mentioned in your presentation that it is how we look at things. If we look at things that things are changing slowly, we would be more adaptive to new changes and would accept changes which will improve our working environment, our ecosystem.
Absolutely.
And yeah, thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts. And I think you would have definitely inspired a lot of students and faculties and people who have joined us online, hearing your story and your views about leadership and how we at personal level can also make small changes to improve our working environment. Your views about. Yeah, over to Felix now.
Felix, you're muted, I think.
Professor Dhawan, if you have time, because there is one interesting question I really want you to answer. I mean, if you have time only. Do you have a time for 2 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, so I will just pick up this question by Vivekananda Nandis from Sikkim. One of the major reforms brought the car is BioNest Incubation Center. You also made IITR decision-making process completely decentralized, with even junior scientists are involved in decision-making. I think this is an amazing practice, unfortunately not followed elsewhere in India. Any thoughts on how to popularize these good practices elsewhere?
So this is one platform how we are popularizing these best practices, right? You come from a wonderful state, which is organic, if I may use that word. We are learning a lot from Sikkim. I think, as I mentioned, the best thing to do is to empower people. That leaves a lot of room for the leader to do what he or she wants to do. He has enough time to work on other issues, take the organization forward. If you keep micromanaging every individual and everything in the organization, it becomes very difficult for the leader to do it. Not only that, the organization then becomes a personality-driven organization rather than a process-driven organization. With freedom to work, with freedom to operate, with freedom to express. I think those traits are very important for any organization. Those cultures have to be ingrained in these organizations. And these workshops that your organizations, your INEAS is organizing, I think these are the kind of platforms that are there to understand and imbibe these cultures from best practices from one organization to the other, from one person to the other. I think these are the platforms that we should encourage more and more, so that these best practices get transferred from one place to the other. You are unfortunately muted again.
Sorry. Yeah.
Very unlike of Felix to be muted.
Yes. Thank you so much. The reason is that I keep on muting because I have a fan running. It's very hot here.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much, sir. It's a pleasure to be with you. You already spent too long, almost 1 hour 45 minutes. 15 minutes. So thank you so much from all of us, the organizers.
Thank you, Felix. Thanks everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Before going, I would like to show you one thing. This one is a picture from our new campus. This was one of your slides on Jai Jawan Jai. This is how you ended your presentation today. Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan, and Jai Anusandhan. And this is exactly our monument also. This is our new campus of Central University of Punjab.
Fantastic.
And we have this one. This is a monument in our university. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I think this is what I think inspires the next generation of people to sort of come and do work in organizations like yours and be empowered, at least. That's wonderful.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And participants, we will meet again at exactly at 5:30 today. We have only very little time now, only 45 minutes. And the speaker is Professor Mona Corey Kasabri, and very interesting person because she is now going to talk on criminal psychology, a very fascinating field, and her journey towards a science leader. She's a young science leader from Israel. So see you all at exactly at 5:30. And enjoy a cup of tea or coffee. Yeah? See you again.